Joining me live now is Ivo Daalder, former U.S. ambassador to NATO and the co-author of The Empty Throne, America's Abdication of Global Leadership. Ivo, thank you so much for being with us. The line that touched me the most, I was watching President Zelensky speak for Congress last night. The line that touched me the most was when he said, "Your money is not charity. Your money is not charity. It is an investment in global democracy, in global security." I'm essentially paraphrasing there, but were the Republicans, that line was clearly meant for the Republicans who have been skeptical. Were they convinced by the speech last night, do you think?
You know, it's hard to watch a speech like this and not be extraordinarily moved by both the bravery that President Zelensky himself represents. The fact is he was on the front line, literally in the front line in Bakhmut, a city that had been pummeled by Russian artillery since at least May. And 24 hours later, he's standing in front of the Congress to tell them that this is not just a fight for Ukraine, it's a fight for the world. And that therefore, the assistance that is being provided is absolutely critical, not just as charity. And I think the line was exactly right, but as an investment into their future. You know, we're facing 10 months into this war, a declining willingness, particularly among Republicans, both in Congress and among the public, to continue to spend what is necessary to help the Ukrainians. At the same time, he's coming to Washington just when Congress is passing another $45 billion worth of military and economic aid. And I think he secured that vote with that speech.
Now, in terms of convincing the Republicans, I'm only sort of harping on about that because I just think that was really his priority last night, given that the Republicans take over the House. Is it likely that, you know, the Republicans are going to sort of push Zelensky to settle for some kind of peace? I mean, he said himself that he's not going to sacrifice his territory for the sake of peace with Russia. So with a Republican-controlled House, what happens next?
Well, first of all, because of this extraordinary amount of money that is in the omnibus bill, funding will continue at least through September of 2023. So that's a nine more months of real funding, and it probably is longer than that. So in that sense, it postpones the next vote until that time, and a lot of things can happen. But secondly, it's clear that Zelensky cannot and will not sort of compromise because some people in Washington are saying that it's time for him to do so. His fight is, as he says, is not just for the world, but it's also for Ukraine. They were attacked. They have been attacked brutally and are continuing to be assaulted, as your reporter just mentioned. And they're going to fight until the very, very, very bitter end. And if there's no more assistance, then it will be without that assistance. But I think he will also underscore, and that will be the next 9 months, and making that clear that it is important to continue to support Ukraine with the capabilities necessary for defend itself. And we do have both Republicans and Democrats, an overwhelming majority in the Senate in favor of that. We have Democrats and an overwhelming majority of Republicans in the House who are in favor of that. And the President of the United States. That's a lot of people who think this is an important thing to do. And we'll see down the line whether a Republican leadership in the House is willing to block the very necessary aid that Ukraine now needs. At least for now, it looks like Ukraine will have the aid it needs until at least September of 2023.
There was a small number of Republicans, House Republicans, who did not clap during that speech, according to reporters who are in the room. But we know that the war is entering a new phase. There's a potential stalemate brewing. I mean, not to mention the cold, freezing cold temperatures that ordinary Ukrainians are having to deal with, given Russia's relentless bombardment of energy infrastructure. They've already been given tens of billions of dollars by the U.S., including the coveted Patriot air defense system. What more does Zelensky need from the United States that he's not currently getting?
Well, he is getting enough to defend himself against the onslaught and to push back the Russians very significantly. About half of the territory that Russia took at the outset of the war has now been liberated by Ukrainian forces, and that liberation wouldn't have been possible without the kind of military assistance, training, and intelligence support that the United States and other allies have been providing, and it needs to continue. There are some capabilities, particularly tanks, longer-range missile systems, that might provide Ukraine with an even greater capability for offensive operations against the Russians. But the Russians are digging in, and they are clearly settling in for the long term to defend the territory that they already have. And it's going to be difficult to break through those lines, probably more difficult than the breakthroughs we saw in Kyiv in April and in Kharkiv up in the northeast in September, and just last month in Kherson, to break through those lines. And so I think what we're seeing is, first, a slowdown in the tempo of war just because it gets too cold and too muddy until the ground really freezes. And then secondly, a war that will move much more slowly in terms of the overall miles that are reconquered. But I also think steadily will push the Russians back over time. And at some point, the question will be raised by the Russians, by the Ukrainians: is there an alternative to fighting in order to settle this war? And that is the dynamic that I think we'll see in the coming year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he certainly gave a very convincing argument to the Americans as to why they need to support him for a little while longer. I mean, he knew his audience. He referenced American history. He spoke in English, of course. He wore military attire as well.